Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Coaches Roundtable discussion at A Life Designed. It's good to see everybody this morning.
Thank you.
You too.
So today we have an open table discussion. Our team of coaches will bring their own topic, and I'll cover a couple of things that are what we've been talking about in our positive coaching community. We've had some topics this week because we've been working on a group of challenges. So all of those challenges are still available to join, and you'll see the link below. And if you're ready to kind of tackle a project over 4 weeks, a certain area, take a look at those challenges. They're priced at $12. And so with that in mind, here we go. Let's get started. Okay, here we go. So this is the only picture I could find where there were different people and it was somebody's turn to stand up and talk, like passing the talking stick or something. And so, yeah, we're just going to see who wants to talk about what. So, here's a project manager and another person on the project kind of working out what needs to get done. And this is what it felt like this week at A Life Design because we launched our challenges. And so behind the scenes, we had 10 challenges launched, and it was pretty fun to go through the learning curves and get them launched on Friday. So some of the topics we discussed in our community this week were journaling. And Dean may reference that since his challenge is on journaling. Gratitude, I have a challenge on gratitude and how that can shift your experience in life pretty quickly. We did a video over the week, this past week, about hobbies and how rewarding hobbies are. So look for that to come out soon. A couple of our coaches engage in self-talk in their challenges, coming from different perspectives. So, some of us talk to ourselves in ways we would never speak to somebody else. So you might be due for a correction there if that's you. Laughter, we had a lot of laughter. We priced our challenges at $12, and that means a payout to the coaches of $5 every time they sell one. So they're joking about what they're going to do for their $5. That's another latte. That's another slice of pizza. So, and look at the link below and see our challenges. One of them might be right for you. Okay, so we have random memes this week. On the left, how to make sure you never get reincarnated on planet Earth ever again, please. I cannot OMFG. So some people are sharing that sentiment. And then here's the rearview mirror. Don't look back. You're no longer going that way. That reminded me of Jonathan in his self-confidence challenge, Let's go. We're going in a new direction. As we create courses, we want to leave our mark on life. So I like this coffee meme. Who left its mark on the table? I was here. The coffee cup left its mark. And then finally, for positive self-talk, we have this meme. I accidentally woke up gorgeous again.
Nice.
Okay, here we go. Yes, so open table. Our team of coaches is ready. Some of us gather randomly week over week, and they can all be found at lifedesign.org on the About page. You scroll down, reach out and contact everybody. But Brian, we always begin with you, and you have some topics that you wanted to bring to Open Table today.
Yeah, this is stuff that I think needs to be talked about. Might be a little controversial, might be a little heavy. I mean, I think it's kind of fun to talk about, but
Jonathan's ready.
yeah. I think especially in America and Europe, I think this conversation needs to be had in a more public, loud kind of way. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about kind of the fall of the West. Okay. Not saying that it's totally fallen, but sort of a lot of the traditional Western values kind of slipping away and like the consequences of a lot of that stuff. I think that's very, very, very deeply affecting American society and European society, also Canada. That's what I mean by the West. So let's talk about kind of the destruction of the American family or sort of the Western family unit, the rise in divorce rates, rise in, I mean, infidelity, kids being raised in single parent homes. I really think we need to look at this. I know it's kind of a heavy topic, but I think as a society, we need to actually take this seriously and not act like it's no big deal. There's a lot of people who think it's like that all this stuff doesn't have a big effect on the next generation. I don't think that's true. I think it really does. So, um, I think people need to start considering like what are things we can do to keep families together, to keep marriages together, to help children raised in two-parent homes, which produces way better outcomes for children. And those are going to be, I mean, that's the future, right?
Mhm.
Children are the future. Those are going to be the people who become adults who either do great things or don't do great things, who are successful and well-adjusted and happy individuals or not. It's a pretty big deal, and I feel like people take it very like casual. A lot of people just act like it's not that big of a deal. I think it is a pretty big deal, and I think there needs to be a louder conversation about this stuff in the public sphere. So I'll give you an example. I heard a statistic, I guess it was a survey. Someone did a survey and they asked men and women, if you found a life partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, like if you found a significant other who had 80% of the traits you're looking for, would you be satisfied with that partner? Almost all of the men said yes, almost all the women said no. So, like, honestly, we have to start looking at that. How are relationships going to work with these kinds of attitudes and mindsets? I think it's really important to look at that. I think we need to be more realistic about relationships and marriage and raising kids for the sake of the next generation, at the very least. Um, and maybe taking those things more seriously. Because if you look at what's happened a lot in American society, and this is one of the reasons I left, there's kind of been a reduction in common sense. There's sort of a reduction in sanity. We're not really taking those things seriously that much anymore. You don't have to be serious about everything in life, but I don't know how you guys feel like, but when I was a kid, so I'm 39, so when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, I was born in 86, so growing up in the 90s, I really had the sense that adults I would talk to, I was the type of kid who would have conversations with adults. So like the adults I would talk to were a lot more reasonable. There was just a lot more common sense. That was the norm.
Mhm.
It was sort of unusual that someone would be unreasonable. It happened for sure, but it was here and there. The norm was people were practical, people had common sense. I mean, there was a large agreement on those things. There's a huge breakdown in that now. And I would say there's never been a successful society in history where a large percentage of the population did not have common sense. Like that has never existed. So that's like, I think that's a pretty important thing. That's like whatever the common sense of their day was, the practical wisdom, like most people had it, you know? So I think we need to look at that. And honestly, we may have to start really being willing to be a little more controversial and pushing back more on some of these kind of crazy things that are going on in Western society now. Maybe even shaming people a little bit who are really trying to argue for really like non-sensible views that just don't work, and society's not going to be able to function if we actually go along with those things. There's a lot of that going on in Western countries. So, um, another thing that I think is really important to realize, and by the way, I'm into a lot of Eastern teachings as well. I'm not trying to be biased West or East, but I think it's important for people to realize society doesn't just function based on political systems or legal systems or economic systems. There's a set of underlying values that the majority of people have to have for any of those other systems to work. So, for example, if people kind of just abandon like morality, if everyone's just willing to rob everyone else, business doesn't work anymore. Like economic policies won't work. So, for example, if you're too scared to open up a storefront because you feel like everyone's just going to rob you, then you can't do business. So at that point, like the economic policies that are created by politicians, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to help. Society actually rests on a set of underlying values. People have to have basic concern for each other, basic care. I mean, consideration for others. You have to be able to trust people. You have to have a certain amount of reasonableness so you can work with people. So there's enough mutual understanding that you can actually agree on things and get things done. You need a certain amount of accountability and character and honesty. And a lot of that stuff, in my opinion, has really been like going down. That was my experience of American society prior to leaving. And I've seen like just from news stories that I mean, just in the Western world in general, there's kind of a degradation of those values. So I do think we have to get back to promoting values like common sense, character, accountability, genuine like concern for the well-being of society and the well-being of others, not virtue signaling where you pretend to care so that you get like social like favor. Um, and honestly, this might be a controversial point, but I think you need to have a certain amount of people in your society who are willing to draw a line in the sand. I think society to some extent depends on people like that, especially once you get into military conflict and things like that, where you like if you look at America's history, in the early days of America, you had a lot of Americans with the fighting spirit, with the revolutionary spirit. I mean, America won a revolution, right? So people were willing to say, we're okay with this stuff, but we're not going to put up with stuff beyond this line. And I do think you need some of that. You know, I mean, it might be controversial, but I think you need some people who say there's certain things we're not going to tolerate. There's certain like things that are just very bad for society that we're not going to tolerate. People can determine what those things are, but that's something I think people need to hear. So that's why I want to say, like the audience in general, like American culture in general, might be a little heavy, but that's what I wanted to say because I feel like that needs to be said out loud and people need to like take that in. So, yeah, if someone else wants to jump in, you don't have to respond. You could bring up your own topic or
I'd
whatever.
love to jump in. I have a quick story, and then we'll see who has another topic.
All
I
right, yeah.
used to work with someone 20 years ago, and he had a teenage son, and his son started getting involved in shenanigans, like after the football games or on the weekends, and they're, in open beds of pickup trucks, and they're driving with open containers, whatever that looked like. And his father sat him down and said, there's a social contract. So, this fabric that has sort of a baseline values, baseline virtual agreement, often unspoken, that says teenage boys can roughhouse, teenage boys can toilet paper houses on Halloween. There's a certain amount of shenanigans that are tolerated because you're a teenage boy and you're getting it out of your system. Then there's a line that when you cross, the police are involved and there are permanent consequences. And so the social contract is understood by adults and communicated to children that are coming up. So he sat down and gave him that communication. This is where the social contract is. But if you have fatherless homes, there isn't anybody doing that. Maybe there's a coach, maybe there's a minister, but this information needs to get passed down to the next generation. And we've kind of skipped that step, Brian, I think, as you say. So, who would like to jump in next with their topic?
I was I was gonna say I don't think it's a heavy information by any means. I
Mm,
think it is what it's happening, and it can be changed. I There is no way it cannot, because otherwise uh, the only future is extinction. I mean, the new generation,
yeah.
they don't have not even values. It's like the basic humanity, like you
Yeah.
see not everyone, but like I'm talking like the masses, and every country that I have been, I'm not talking just one in specific,
Yeah.
but it seems like the new generation is like, it's like they know every. Now I understand the old people from when
Yeah.
they were like, the next generation is fucked. Now I'm like, now I understand why they were like the future, how it looks like. Um, so no, I don't think that is any kind of harsh information. I think it's basic information that it's needed, that in order for have a
Mhm,
functional society,
mhm,
we need to be more responsible with
mhm,
the way even the way we reproduce as
mhm,
humans.
mhm,
Like,
Yeah.
in my opinion, we are too many. Like, I don't see
Yeah.
the only reason why they want more is so they can enslave more and then can still make money. But that's the only reason. We don't need more humans. In fact, the less humans, the more you can communicate mouth to mouth, the values, like the
mhm,
real meaningful stuff,
mhm.
like the juicy experience of life, you know?
I have a question for you, Jonathan. I know your challenge is about having powerful self-confidence, and some of that involves kind of what information are you taking in and what self-talk are you creating for yourself? And so, they say on the phone, you can hear of every disaster worldwide 24/7. So you can hear every woman who's misbehaved, every man who's misbehaved, every out of control child. There are children being convicted of murdering their parents because they took away the PlayStation or something. So we can go find super bad news 24/7. But it does tend to pollute us. So even if we recognize there's a trend line, our individual lives could be lived differently. So, Jonathan, what do you recommend?
For which
Or
exactly for?
if you're letting in bad news and
Oh,
it's
yeah, yeah.
shaping
Um,
your worldview, how do you reshape your worldview from the inside out?
yeah. So the answer to that is as simple as you may think. It's not watching. That will be the first step. Literally, not watching news. Like,
Mhm.
oh, obviously they're going to come to you one way or another. But the
Mhm.
reality is, if something happens in another part of the world and is not, you are not in a position of power to do something about it, what
Mhm.
you should be doing is making yourself competent enough so that if you want to go fight in that area, then you can go. But
Mhm.
if you're just a normal citizen, what you should be doing is improving yourself on
Mhm.
every area possible in your life, and also maintaining your own cocoon of positive energy. For that,
Mhm.
a great idea is not to watch external suffering like extra, because
Mhm.
something is going to happen around your surroundings. There's
Mhm.
no need for extra
Yeah.
bombardment.
Yeah.
So imagine if you start thinking of all the, like, each helicopter that falls down on each country on the planet, you're going, by the end of the day, you're not going to be able to function. So
Mhm.
that is not the way life was designed, I'm pretty sure. It is a war against humans. It's a shame that whoever started it, I don't know who, but it's a shame that that's so childish. It's such
Is
a
there a topic that you wanted to discuss in particular?
there's a couple. Actually, it's kind of related. I wanted to talk about the different set of skills that somebody needs when it comes to dating and
Mm-hmm.
an actual relationship, it
Mm-hmm.
is like a different universe. And is related because I see kids or adults that are actually kids getting into a relationship and
Yeah.
having no idea of even the basic skills.
Yeah.
And then they expect the woman to fall in love for the rest of her time. So it's kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
it is a lot of responsibility. So actually, if you're watching this and you're a man, I can definitely help you with that. If you're looking to have more options in your life,
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking to improve that area of your life,
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely do that with you, because getting a date is something. It's a lot of skills that you have to master in order to just get the date, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have a relationship, and it's a whole different universe that
Mm-hmm.
most men, like most fathers, never sat with their kids and told them, hey, listen, kid, this is how it can get, like this is what you're going to face.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it doesn't happen, right? That's what I'm here for. I can be the alpha dad you never had. You can just contact me. Fine. uh,
Well, we talk about the breakdown of family and the role models, right? If there's no dad in the home, or if you have strongly dysfunctional parents, then there isn't a role model. But Jonathan, to your point, you can be a role model in society being the best you can. So other people will look to you and notice how you're doing it.
and just to yourself, because you're not competing against anybody else. As
Mm,
long as you focus on doing the best that you can, do not less, not more, just the best for yourself,
mhm,
improving a little and a
yeah.
little on this area, that area.
Hmm. And
And
there's,
then if you really want to become like some force against some other force, you
mhm,
have to become there's no way around it. You If
mhm,
you want to fight some big problem, you're gonna have to become a fucking huge amount of, you're gonna have to have millions of dollars, millions of people behind you. For that, you're going to have to be a magnet. You cannot just sit in your house eating popcorn and complain.
mhm,
Ah.
mhm, mhm. Well, and the role that you take in your own life does produce results around you, as we know. And some people surprisingly say, I didn't know there was coaching for that. Yeah, there is.
Oh yes, there is.
So, Dean, so you have some thoughts.
Well, I have lots of thoughts. Let me just start and see what comes out. Talking, with going back to what Brian was saying, I do think that conversations about the decay of the sort of underlying value system of the West have been happening for a long time. I think they've mostly happened in kind of more intellectual right-wing
Mhm,
circles.
Yeah.
mhm.
But we are so polarized that nobody that and so sort of siloed.
There's no crossover.
There's nobody here's that many people don't hear those conversations. Um, I was just thinking, a very good book came out a few years ago called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. It's kind of an academic book by Carl Trueman, who is on the right, but it is a pretty straightforward intellectual history of how this happened. And it's the kind of book that nobody outside of those circles would probably even consider reading,
Yeah.
although it would be very helpful to explain where we are. I was also thinking about, you know, as I said, these conversations have gone on for a long time. Um, and I was thinking about probably my favorite poem of all time, and maybe the best poem ever in English, which is God's Grandeur by Gerard Manley Hopkins, which is also about this topic in a way, but concludes with the lines, "The Holy Spirit over the bent world broods with warm breast and bright wings." And the poem basically is about the darkening of the West, but the notion is that there's sort of an underlying presence of a spirit that will not allow it to disappear. right? Because in the poem, its wings are bright, so it's bringing light back. And I think so what I think has happened is this collapse Brian is describing, and we've kind of reached a point where in my own coaching practice, I have people come who say, I have these personal problems, and also I'm freaked out by the world.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so what's happened is that we are simultaneously reaching kind of a tipping point with the collapse of our shared values in the West. And part of the response to that has been what we're calling this sort of new great awakening, right? Where the people are turning to look for other sources of meaning. And so I do think we're at a crisis point, but it's not entirely dark, right?
Mhm.
I just saw a news story that over Easter, like in the United States, there were, I think I read 50,000 baptisms among Catholic and Orthodox churches in the United States.
Mhm.
And, that's not to say anybody listening should become Catholic or Orthodox, but it is to say something is happening and there is something going on kind of in the broader population where people are looking for spiritual, moral foundations. And I think that's good. Right. And I think
Yes.
that's the work that we are doing is to try to provide some of that. Um, and so I think my point is just to say all of that, yes, and more, right? That there's actually much more happening as people come to see that, and also that the West is in crisis, but uh, but the spirit still broods over the bit world, as Hopkins would say.
A
Yeah.
number of our coaching challenges, and then Brian, you can give some feedback, include journaling prompts, on
Hmm.
the area that they're working on, developing their intuition or developing a mojo mindset, some journaling prompts. And your challenge is around journaling. And it can be really helpful to just kind of, if you have things sort of tangled up and you can't quite see your way past, journaling can be so helpful. So maybe you could speak on that. But my thought, and then we'll go back to you, Dean, and to you, Brian. We see in history there was a Renaissance, a European Renaissance. We see in history there was an age of enlightenment. And what was it like to live through that, where things were kind of upended? Galileo said, the sun doesn't revolve around us, we revolve around it. And the kind of fracturing of sort of a worldview that came along with the scientific method, or however that looks. I think we're in a similar age while we see some kind of deconstruction going on, and then a rebuilding of a fabric that is more human friendly, more humankind. From the business landscape, we're doing a series on the YouTube channel. Thanks everybody for subscribing. We crossed 15,000 subscribers, so it's very exciting. There's an upending. I have a recent interview with a lawyer that'll be released later who has multinational clients. And he said the changes in trade have upended trade, never to go back to the way it was. It's not a temporary shift, it's an upending. And so, not just trade, not just law, not just politics, not just religion, things are being dramatically changed all at once. And the conversations around AI point to the speed at which this change is taking place. And so, this is what it feels like to go through early phases of some kind of deconstruction and then a rebuilding in a grander fashion of how we live together on the planet. But it can be uncomfortable during this deconstruction phase. So, Dean, if you want to mention journaling, and then Brian, you had a comment too.
Yeah, my challenge, the challenge I'm leading is on journaling as a practice. And I think part of the transition that we're going through really requires people or at least it would be very helpful to people to start developing some kinds of practices like that ground and center them, and journaling is certainly one of those. That because just as we are in a time of upending, right? Um, Culturally, that also happens for people on a personal level. And learning to really catalog and sift through all of your thoughts and impressions and memories, and to get down to what your sort of core values are is an indispensably important thing, especially in a time like this where two things are happening, where there's a lot of threat and there's an amazing amount of opportunity. And without the kind of clarity that comes from a structured self-reflection process, I just think most people are lost and kind of getting swept away with the ever-changing currents. It's like Brian was saying. It's like you can say most people have no common sense, and that may be true, but what also people have is no inner life, right? There's nothing in here that anchors them to something other than just like whatever cultural nonsense is handed to them. And so something like journaling, and uh if you want to know more about that, then sign up for the challenge and how to do it. But something like that is a way of anchoring yourself in the sort of rushing cultural waters, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with what you're saying. And I do think it's good, like you're mentioning, Dean. These conversations tend to happen in academic circles, maybe more right-wing leaning. I totally agree with that. I think it's good if we start, or if people in general start bringing some of these ideas, some of these conversations to people that aren't in those circles. That's one of the things I wanted to do today, because I just think more people need to get exposed to this. And listen, people can believe whatever they want, have whatever religion they want. I'm not trying to make it political. You can vote however you want. But the thing is, there's really no way to make a society function well without some core underlying values that make sense and that work for social functioning. You really can't throw that out. So whether you get that from religion, whether you get it from common sense, or just because your parents raised you with these things, or there has to be some source of those critical values. Otherwise, kind of everything falls apart. Um, and we're seeing a lot of that. But I agree, Dean and Mom. There is a turning around of that. There are people who are coming over to saying, "Wait a minute, I think we're going in the wrong direction." Which is great. The other thing I want to mention is there's really no such thing as a values vacuum, is what I would argue. So when you get rid of traditional values or the old values, they get replaced with something else. That people don't just go around and not believe anything or not have any opinions. That doesn't happen. So the question is, if you want to throw out all the old traditional values, you need to replace it with something better. And really doesn't that really doesn't happen that often. Maybe in something like, Mom, you brought up the Enlightenment, the Renaissance. I would say that's a time when that happened.
Mhm.
We got rid of old values and they were replaced with things that actually led to more human advancement and progress. That was a case of that. Um, but yeah, I think people should be aware of that. So I heard someone make the argument the other day, and I think this is a good argument, that as people moved further and further away from religion, like religion didn't really go away. Like it gets replaced by new forms of religion. So now like woke ideology is basically a religion now. There's a lot of people that have very, like, you could call it religious zealotry in terms of the feelings they have about it. Um, they're very upset if you disagree. They're very like more so than way more than like religious people are today in my experience. So a lot of times when you get rid of values, they're going to get replaced by something else. or maybe they get replaced by just entertainment, distraction, pleasures. I mean, it gets replaced by something else. It's not going to just remain as a vacuum. So I think people need to think like, are we replacing the old with something better or with something worse? And I think people should really like look at that and evaluate if things are going in the right direction. That's what I would say. So
I think that's great. You know, we're also in our coaching conversations hearing people that are arriving at these conclusions maybe ahead of some of their friends and family, that there's, you know, what we call vibration separation. You know, people decide, well, you know, it's not okay. This, I've kind of let this go without comment, but now I'm going to draw a line or manage a boundary. And there's coaching to help you with what you're navigating in your life. Our team of coaches is ready to help you. We have 10 challenges you can visit down below. But, you know, one of the things, Jonathan, that you encourage people to do, and then you could share your final thoughts and how people get a hold of you, is to start with the man in the mirror. Whatever else is going on, that's where we begin with the man in the mirror. Take your power back personally. And then you can be powerful in your world in whatever way you find. So share your final thoughts. And Jonathan, how do we get a hold of you? Oh, wait, we can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes, now it's good. Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. Now that you were mentioning the politics side of it, being non-biased, because I was born here, but then I grew up in another country. So then when I came back as a young adult,
Mhm.
I didn't even know how many parties they existed. I was completely ignorant. So over the years, um, also I don't vote because they don't deserve it. So I was just thinking, America is ready for a real combination, like a bridge.
Mhm.
You know, there's
Mhm.
good things about the red ones. There's great things about the blue ones as well.
Mhm. 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 Your mic just
Oh
cut
yeah.
out.
I think it might be dying or something. Maybe it's running out of, yeah.
Let's see. We're going to disconnect the mic and we're
Mhm.
going to do the final thoughts this way.
No, that's
Yeah.
very good. Your sound is good again. Mhm.
Can hear you. Yeah. Yeah.
Ah, beautiful. Um, so yeah, if someone comes along with the real ideals of, hey, I really want to help the humans, I will be glad to vote for that human. The problem is most people right now are greedy and stupid. So there needs to be a change within ourselves first. And I'm pretty sure that if someone comes along like functioning as a bridge, it's not that complicated to unite humans.
Mhm.
Because at the end we are so similar. You have no idea. Everybody has their own problems, their own universes.
Mhm.
So if you just put yourself out of your own little world and start looking at everybody else as humans,
Mhm.
puts you in your place. uh, Spiritually, I mean. So yeah, final thoughts. You can find me in a livedesign.org. Also, Jonathan R Coaching on Instagram as well. Jonathan R Coaching on TikTok, and my email jonathanrcoaching@gmail.com.
Oh, fantastic. It's lovely to have you here in the conversation. All of that'll be in our notes below. And for Dean, final thoughts and how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, final thoughts. I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, I think I would go back to kind of what I was saying a little bit ago and try to reiterate just this notion that, well, that what you were saying is very, very important. That it's so easy for people, especially like in a media saturated environment where we are sort of consistently thrust into narratives about powers so much larger than ourselves. It is just so important that people begin to cultivate their own sort of responsible and empowered way of thinking about the world so that they are not that they don't come to see themselves as sort of passive objects in it, which is the goal of so much of the sort of media narrative is
Mhm.
to render you passive.
Mhm.
And you don't have to be passive. You can, in fact, be a
Mhm.
shaper of your own
Mhm.
reality and the realities of others.
Mhm.
And so I would encourage people to reflect on that and to do that. You find me at dnabbit.com or at dnabbit on Twitter are the best places.
Very good. Thank you so much. And Brian, final thoughts.
Yeah, so final thoughts. I think, Jonathan, your concept of the bridge is a really good point. I really agree with that. And actually, that's part of my vision for ALD. That's one of the things that I want to do here. So I think all of us here, all the coaches in this conversation right now, are doing a fantastic job of modeling how people from different perspectives can really share insight and wisdom in a very pleasant, positive, respectful manner. And like, this is a good model for how people on different sides of the aisle or with
Mhm.
different value systems can learn to be open to listening to each other, open to speaking to each other, open to learning from the other person. I think it's extremely important to be open to learning from people who have different beliefs from you or different perspectives or different values from you, because you never know what you can learn and it could actually be something invaluable to you, which if you weren't willing to, have a friendly conversation with people, you never would have gotten that. I would like to see a lot more of this in the American political discussion specifically, but just in cultural daily discussions between people in general. And I do think we've done a really good job of demonstrating how that can exist. Like, that, and that's just a great thing. So people watching, consider having conversations this way. I think it's really good. So yeah, you can find me at alifedesign.org or Special K Coaching on Instagram.
Very good. Well, it's been really fun to have this open table discussion, and we're all rooting for humans, as Jonathan would say. We want to root for our fellow humans. And there's coaching. Whatever you're facing, try one of our challenges, give one of our coaches a call. Our job is to facilitate and support what you want to achieve. And a common comment after someone has achieved with a coach is, wow, I didn't even know this was possible. So it's possible. Visit down below. Our team of coaches are ready to support you and check out some of our challenges. And thanks again for subscribing and helping us get over 15,000 subscribers. And we'll see you guys all next week.